What if the biggest turning points in the global economy didn't happen in boardrooms, stock exchanges, or government halls, but in moments of chaos no one recognized until it was too late? What if every recession, every boom, every financial miracle you've ever heard of can be traced back to a handful of decisions some made centuries ago that still dictate the price of your groceries, your rent, and even your paycheck? Today, we're rediving into the hidden chain reaction behind 3 historic moments that permanently reshaped the global economy. But here's the twist. One of these moments is still in motion, and most people alive today have no idea they were part of it. To understand how we got here, we need to step back farther than you might expect into a world where money was not a digital number, nor a printed bill, but a promise backed by kings, by empires, by vaults full of metal, and later by nothing at all. Economists like John Maynard Keynes, world leaders like Franklin D. Roosevelt and Richard Nixon, and financiers from the Rothschilds to modern-day central bankers all made choices designed to stabilize their eras. But in the long term, many of those choices produced the exact crises they attempted to prevent. Keep that in mind, because every single moment in this story follows the same pattern. Origins, rise, breaking point, fallout, failed fixes, modern parallels, and the mystery we'll solve by the end is this. Are we living on the edge of the next global economic turning point right now? Section 1. The Gold Standard. The birth of global monetary order. Origins. Money before money. Long before modern currencies, societies bartered. Grain for tools, livestock for cloth. But, as trade expanded, barter became inefficient. Precious metals emerged as a universal medium, and by the 1800s, major nations linked their currencies to gold. This was the beginning of the classical gold standard, a system that, in theory, kept governments honest. If your currency represented a fixed amount of gold, you couldn't print money recklessly. You needed real metal to back it. Simple, elegant, powerful. Rise. The first globalized economy. By the late 19th century, the gold standard created a stable international monetary system. Exchange rates were predictable. Trade flourished. Foreign investment exploded. It was perhaps the closest humanity has come to true financial equilibrium. But underneath this stability was a silent flaw, one that would eventually topple the system. Gold supply didn't grow as fast as global economic demand. Without enough gold, economies could not expand, even when populations and innovation demanded it. Breaking point, World War I. When World War I erupted, governments suspended the gold standard to print money for military spending. Prices surged. Debts soared. After the war, nations tried to return to the gold standard, but the world had changed. Rebuilding economies required flexible monetary policy, but gold was rigid. Too rigid. Fallout. A fragile return. The interwar gold standard braked growth, deepened debt crises, and helped turn market corrections into collapses. Most historians agree the gold standard worsened the Great Depression. In 1933, FDR made the historic decision to end gold convertibility for U.S. citizens. It was a moment that rewired global finance. Failed fixes, pretending the system still worked. Nations clung to modified versions of gold backing. But by World War II, the system was essentially dead. The world needed a new monetary order, and it arrived at Bretton Woods. Section 2. The Bretton Woods System. The dollar ascends. Origins. A plan to prevent another depression. In 1944, delegates from 44 countries met in a hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Their mission: design a financial system to stabilize the post-war world. The solution: peg global currencies to the US dollar. Peg the US dollar to gold. Make the dollar the center of world trade. The United States, rich in gold, after the war became the axis around which global finance rotated. Rise. The American century. The Bretton Woods system fueled reconstruction and growth. Europe rebuilt. Japan industrialized. The US became the global banker. Confidence soared. But once again, a hidden flaw lurked beneath the success. The world needed more dollars to trade. The US printed them, but its gold reserves didn't grow at the same pace. Sound familiar? Breaking point: too many dollars, not enough gold. By the late 1960s, countries began doubting the US could redeem all dollars for gold. French President Charles de Gaulle even sent warships to pick up gold from New York. The US faced a mathematical impossibility. There were more dollars overseas than gold in American vaults. Something had to give. Fallout: Nixon shocks the world. On August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon announced that the U.S. would no longer exchange dollars for gold. This single decision made in a moment of crisis ended the Bretton Woods era and launched the system we live under today. Fiat money, floating exchange rates, unlimited money creation. This wasn't just a policy change. It was the birth of the modern global economy. Failed fixes: the illusion of control. Central banks tried repeatedly to stabilize exchange rates, but the genie was out of the bottle. Money was no longer tied to anything physical. It was tied to trust, and trust alone. And trust can be fragile. Section 3. The 2008 financial crisis, when trust finally broke. Origins: deregulation. The late 20th century, financial markets innovated rapidly. New derivatives, securitized mortgages, and global capital flows created an illusion of safety through complexity. Banks believed they had distributed risk. In reality, they had merely hidden it. Rise: a housing market that couldn't lose. Low interest rates and loose lending inflated a housing bubble. Home prices rose. Investors poured in. Banks leveraged themselves to historic levels. People believed home prices could never fall. This assumption would soon shatter. Breaking point: subprime reality. When homeowners began defaulting on loans, the entire financial system felt the shock. Mortgage-backed securities turned toxic. Banks realized they were holding billions in worthless assets. The system froze. Fallout: global crisis. Lehman Brothers collapsed. Stock markets plunged. Credit evaporated. Governments worldwide intervened with massive bailouts and emergency programs. The crisis revealed a truth the world wasn't ready to face. Our financial system was built on interconnected risks no one truly understood. Failed fixes: patching holes with bigger holes. Regulations tightened. Rates fell to zero. Central banks printed trillions, but the core issues: debt dependence, global financial entanglement, and over-reliance on central banks remain unresolved. Some argue they are now worse. Modern parallels, patterns repeating today. Here is where the story echoes into the present. Global debt is now over $300 trillion, triple what it was before the 2008 crisis. More than half of all US dollars in existence were created in the last decade. Housing, stock markets, and corporate bonds all depend on historically low interest rates. And for the first time in modern history, major economies are aging, slowing, and competing for resources simultaneously. The patterns we've seen: rigid systems breaking under pressure, leaders applying short-term fixes, and crises emerging from hidden flaws are repeating once again. Are we living on the edge of the next historic economic shift? The data says yes. The deeper question is, which moment are we in? Origins, rise, or breaking point? 3 takeaways. 1. Every major economic system begins as a solution and ends as a problem. Stability creates confidence. Confidence creates risk, and risk eventually overwhelms the system that enabled it. 2. Money is ultimately a story we agree to believe. Gold, dollars, credit, they work only as long as trust holds. 3. History doesn't repeat, but financial patterns do. The same cycle: innovation, growth, overconfidence, collapse, has repeated for centuries. We're living through an era where technology, geopolitics, and financial policy are colliding in ways humanity has never seen before. The next historic moment isn't a matter of if, it's a matter of when and whether we'll recognize it before it arrives. If you want to stay ahead of those shifts, understand the forces shaping your financial future, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and drop a comment below. Which historic moment do you think changed the global economy the most? More deep dives are on the way.